The first sign something was wrong came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Plato. Lieutenant Rebecca Torres was sipping her morning coffee when the massive energy readings flooded her screens. She nearly dropped her cup as she watched the impossible data stream across her monitors. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself, running the scans again. The readings stayed the same. Something huge was coming out of empty space at the edge of their solar system. 3 hours later, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the live feed from their most powerful telescopes. What she saw made her blood run cold. Massive ships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built, hung in space like sleeping giants. Their dark metal hulls reflected no light, making them look like pieces of the void itself had taken shape. "How many?" she asked her aide, Captain Morrison. 12 confirmed, Admiral. Maybe more hiding behind the big ones. Each ship is at least 50 kilometers long. The largest one is almost 100. Chun felt her stomach drop. Earth's biggest warship was barely 2 kilometers from nose to tail. These alien vessels could carry their entire fleet inside their cargo holds. The alien ships sat there for 6 hours, silent and waiting. Then they began to broadcast. Every screen on Earth, Luna, Mars, and the outer colonies suddenly went dark. Then a face appeared that would haunt humanity's nightmares for years to come. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin stretched tight over sharp bones. Its eyes were large and completely black, like looking into deep space. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical, like death itself was talking. "People of Sol 3. The world you call Earth, I am Ambassador Veltar of the Cytherian hegemony. Your system has been marked for integration into our empire. You will comply with the following terms immediately." The alien's image shifted, showing holographic displays of Earth cities, military bases, and space stations. Chun realized with growing horror that they had been watching humanity for some time. They knew exactly where everything was. "You will surrender all military vessels and weapons to our forces. Your governments will dissolve and accept hegemony rule. Your people will relocate to designated zones on your planet. Those with useful skills will be transported to other worlds to serve the Empire. Resistance is futile and will result in the complete destruction of your species." The display changed again, showing 12 different worlds. Each one was a burned, lifeless rock floating in space. Cities that had once held billions were now nothing but craters and melted glass. These civilizations chose to resist. "We made examples of them. You have 72 of your hours to comply. After that time, we will demonstrate why the galaxy fears the hegemony." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. President Alexander Morrison sat in the emergency session of the United Nations, watching world leaders argue and panic. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others demanded they fight to the last man. Most just sat there in shock, unable to process what they had just witnessed. "We have to be realistic," said the British Prime Minister, her voice shaking. "Look at those ships. Look at what they did to those other worlds. We can't fight that, so we just give up?" shouted the Russian president. "Let them turn us into slaves?" "Better slaves than dead," someone else replied. Morrison listened to the arguments, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about a conversation she had with Admiral Chun 3 years ago, when Ching had asked for funding for something called Project Prometheus. At the time, it had seemed like paranoid military planning. Now, it might be their only hope. On Luna Base, Admiral Chun was having similar thoughts. She stood in front of a wall display showing the alien fleet, but she wasn't looking at the enemy ships. She was looking at what appeared to be empty space around them, space that wasn't as empty as it seemed. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly to her aide, "send a coded message to all Project Prometheus stations. Use the old mining survey channels. Tell them the harvest is ready to begin." Morrison nodded and hurried away. Chun continued to stare at the display, a cold smile forming on her lips. 50 years ago, when humanity first detected alien technology passing through their system, a small group of military leaders had made a decision. They decided that if aliens ever came to Earth, humanity would be ready. Not ready to surrender? Ready to fight? They had hidden weapons in the asteroid belt disguised as mining equipment. They had built secret military bases on dead moons, listed in the records as research stations. They had trained special forces units in tactics that no civilized species would ever consider using. Most importantly, they had prepared for a war that most humans didn't even know was coming. The aliens had watched Earth for 50 years, but they had only seen what humanity wanted them to see. They saw a primitive species barely capable of space travel. They saw scattered colonies with weak defenses. They saw exactly what Chen and her people had spent decades preparing them to see. Dr. Marcus Webb sat in his underground laboratory on Ceres, watching the alien ultimatum for the 5th time. Around him, technicians worked frantically to prepare weapons that officially didn't exist, antimatter warheads that the public thought were just theoretical, shield generators that the science community believed were still decades away from development, stealth systems that made human ships invisible to any scanner the aliens possessed. "How long until we're ready?" Webb asked his assistant. 18 hours for full deployment. "But sir, we've only run computer simulations. We don't know if any of this will actually work against alien technology," Webb nodded grimly. "Then I guess we're about to find out." On Earth, Captain Elena Vasquez prepared her ship for what looked like a civilian evacuation mission. Her vessel, the cargo hauler Peaceful Dawn, was registered as a simple transport ship. What the records didn't show was that it carried enough firepower to level a city and was crewed by some of the deadliest soldiers in human space. As she watched families board evacuation ships, Vasquez felt a familiar anger building in her chest. The aliens thought humans would just roll over and die. They thought humanity was weak because they had only seen their peaceful side. They were about to learn a very painful lesson about what humans were really capable of when their families were threatened. The countdown timer on every screen in human space showed 66 hours remaining. Across the solar system, hidden weapons came online. Secret military units received their final orders. Ships that looked like helpless civilian transports powered up weapon systems that could crack planets. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the alien fleet through the observation window. They sat there like arrogant gods, certain of their victory. They had no idea that they were looking at a trap 50 years in the making. "Admiral," Captain Morrison reported, "all Prometheus stations are reporting ready. The mining ships are in position. The evacuation fleet is prepared for Operation Exodus." Chun nodded slowly. To any observer, it looked like humanity was preparing to surrender or run. The truth was far different. In 66 hours, the aliens would get their answer. It just wouldn't be the answer they were expecting. The galaxy was about to learn something important about the third planet from Sol. When Earth's children were threatened, they didn't just fight back. They fought with a fury that could burn worlds. 48 hours remained on the countdown. The world watched as President Morrison stepped up to the podium for what everyone believed would be humanity's surrender speech. Her face was calm, but her hands shook slightly as she gripped the sides of the podium. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of Earth and beyond. "We face the darkest hour in our species' history. The Catherian hegemony has given us an impossible choice: surrender our freedom or face extinction." Around the globe, people held their breath. Many had already begun packing, preparing for the worst. Others had gathered in churches and temples, praying for a miracle that seemed impossible. After consulting with world leaders and military advisors, Morrison continued, "I must announce that Earth will begin immediate compliance with hegemony demands. Evacuation ships are being prepared. Military assets will be powered down. We cannot fight what we cannot defeat." The transmission ended, leaving billions of humans in despair. What they didn't know was that Morrison had just delivered the most important lie in human history. Admiral Chun watched the president's speech from her secret command center buried deep beneath Luna's surface. This facility didn't exist on any official records. To the outside world, it was just another research station studying moon rocks. In reality, it was the nerve center of the largest military deception ever attempted. Phase 1 complete, Chung reported to the small group of officers gathered around the holographic display. The aliens believe we're surrendering. All their surveillance is focused on the evacuation ships and the military stand down. They have no idea what's really happening. Captain Elena Vasquez smiled grimly from the screen. She was broadcasting from the bridge of her ship, now in deep space heading toward what looked like a standard evacuation route. The peaceful dawn is loaded and ready, Admiral. My crew is eager to show these aliens what human peace really looks like. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on another screen from his hidden laboratory. Behind him, technicians worked frantically on weapons that officially didn't exist. Prometheus stations are armed and operational. The antimatter charges are stable. We've had 50 years to perfect this technology. The aliens are about to face weapons they've never seen before. Chun nodded. The plan was working perfectly. For 5 decades, humanity's greatest minds had prepared for this moment. They had studied every piece of alien technology that passed through their system. They had learned to hide their true capabilities behind a mask of primitive innocence. Most importantly, they had prepared weapons specifically designed to kill Cytherian warships. The aliens thought they understood humanity. They had watched Earth for 50 years, but they had only seen the surface. They saw peaceful traders, slow colony ships, and primitive military vessels that posed no threat. What they missed was the network of hidden bases, secret weapons, and specially trained soldiers that made up humanity's real military. On the asteroid Vesta, Commander Jackson supervised the final preparations of Mining Station 7. To any outside observer, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a simple rock processing facility. The massive drilling equipment or transporters and industrial machinery all functioned perfectly for their stated purpose. What the aliens couldn't detect were the antimatter torpedo tubes hidden inside the drilling equipment. The ore transporters were actually armored assault ships. The industrial machinery was really a weapons factory that had been running at full capacity for decades. All teams report ready, Jackson announced to his crew. Most of them had spent their entire careers pretending to be miners. They knew every bolt and wire of their disguised weapons. When the time came, they could transform their peaceful mining station into a military fortress in less than 10 minutes. Similar preparations were happening across the solar system. Research Station Omega on Europa was actually a torpedo manufacturing facility. The communications array on Titan was really a massive sensor network that could track ships across light years. Even the tourism facilities on Mars had hidden military purposes. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They assumed that a species capable of interstellar travel would build their military in the obvious places around their homeworld. In their main shipping lanes at their most important colonies, humans had done the opposite. They had scattered their real military across empty space, hidden inside facilities that served innocent civilian purposes. Dr. Sarah Kim worked frantically in the hidden sections of the International Space Station. To the aliens watching, she was just another scientist studying zero-gravity agriculture. In reality, she was one of humanity's leading experts in alien technology. For 30 years, she had studied every scrap of Cytherian equipment that humanity had secretly recovered. Their shields operate on a rotating frequency pattern, she explained to Admiral Chun over a secure channel. They change the frequency every few seconds to prevent sustained bombardment. But there's a gap, a split second when the old frequency shuts down and the new one starts up. Our antimatter charges are designed to hit that exact moment, Chun smiled coldly. How many shots do we get? Each station gets one perfect shot before they adapt. But if we coordinate the attack properly, one shot per station should be enough. Their ships are powerful, but they're not built to handle simultaneous antimatter explosions from 12 different directions. Captain Morrison interrupted from her position monitoring alien communications. Admiral, we're picking up transmissions. From their fleet, they're discussing our surrender. They sound pleased with themselves. What are they saying? Standard Hegemony Protocol. They're planning to land occupation forces on Earth in 36 hours. Ground troops to oversee the transition. They're not even bothering to keep their full fleet here. Half their ships are. Preparing to leave for other systems once they confirm our compliance. Chun felt a surge of satisfaction. The aliens were so confident in their victory that they were already planning to move on to their next conquest. They had no idea they were walking into the most carefully prepared ambush in galactic history. On board the evacuation ship New Hope, families huddled together in fear as they traveled away from Earth. What they didn't know was that their ship was actually the disguised assault cruiser Vengeance, crewed by some of humanity's most elite soldiers. The refugees were really special forces operators and their families, all volunteers for the most dangerous mission in human history. Lieutenant Torres, the same officer who had first detected the alien fleet, now sat at a combat station hidden behind false walls. Her job was to coordinate the attack with other disguised ships. Around her, soldiers who had spent years training for this moment prepared weapons that could turn their peaceful transport into a deadly warship. "Remember," Torres announced to her team, "we get one chance at surprise. After that, it's a straight fight. The aliens think we're helpless civilians running away. Let's show them what human civilians are really capable of." The genius of the plan was its simplicity. The aliens expected humanity to respond like every other species they had conquered, with either immediate surrender or desperate, doomed resistance. They never considered that humans might spend 50 years preparing a deception this elaborate. Every evacuation ship was really a warship. Every mining station was really a weapons platform. Every research facility was really a military base. The aliens had been watching humanity's real military for decades without realizing it. As the countdown timer showed 30 hours remaining, the final pieces fell into place. Hidden across the solar system, thousands of humans prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of their species. They had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment, training for a war that most of humanity didn't even know was coming. The aliens sat in their mighty fleet, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never faced defeat. They believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy. They were about to learn that they had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened humanity's children. And when humans fought for their children, they didn't fight to survive. They fought to win, no matter the cost. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. The countdown timer hit 0 at exactly 12 o'clock Earth Standard Time. Across the solar system, billions of humans held their breath as they waited to see what would happen next. Many expected to see alien ships moving toward Earth to begin the occupation. Instead, they witnessed something that would change the course of galactic history forever. Admiral Chun stood in her hidden command center, watching the alien fleet through long-range sensors. The massive Catherian ships hung in space like sleeping giants, confident in their overwhelming power. They had given humanity 72 hours to surrender, and now that time was up. "All stations report ready," Captain Morrison announced from her position at the communications console. Across the solar system, dozens of hidden military bases waited for the signal that would begin humanity's counterattack. Ambassador Veltares' cold voice echoed across all communication channels. "One final time. People of Sol 3, your time has expired. You have chosen compliance as expected. Our occupation forces will now begin landing procedures. Any resistance will result in immediate termination." Chun smiled grimly. Famous last words. All stations. "This is Admiral Chun. Execute Operation Prometheus. Show them what humans are really made of." The first sign that something was wrong came from Mining Station 7 on the asteroid. Vesta, Commander Jackson watched through his scope as the nearest Catherian ship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Fist, began moving toward Earth. The alien vessel was over 50 kilometers long, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could crack planets. "Target acquired," Jackson announced to his crew. Around him, men and women who had spent decades pretending to be simple miners transformed into some of the deadliest soldiers in human space. Hidden panels slid away to reveal weapons that officially didn't exist. Antimatter torpedo loaded and ready, reported his weapons officer, a woman who had been introduced to alien visitors as a rock processing specialist. Firing solution locked in, Jackson took a deep breath. Everything humanity had worked for over the past 50 years came. Down to this moment, fire. The antimatter torpedo streaked through space faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. It was designed specifically to exploit the weakness Dr. Kim had discovered in Cytherian shields. For a split second, as the alien ship's defensive barriers rotated to a new frequency, there was a gap. The torpedo hit at exactly that moment. The explosion lit up half the solar system. The Iron Fist, which had destroyed countless worlds, simply ceased to exist. Where a massive warship had been moments before, there was now only expanding plasma and debris. The alien fleet erupted into confusion. Warning signals blared across their communication channels as they tried to understand what had just happened. Their most powerful ship had been destroyed by what appeared to be a mining station. It was impossible, but the impossible was just beginning. All across the solar system, humanity's hidden weapons revealed themselves. Research Station Omega on. Europa fired a spread of antimatter torpedoes that tore through 2 more Cytherian ships. The communications array on Titan turned out to be a massive railgun that sent tungsten slugs through alien hulls at a significant fraction of light speed. Tourism facilities on Mars opened to reveal missile batteries that had been waiting 50 years for this moment. In the space of 10 minutes, 6 Cytherian ships were burning wrecks. The remaining aliens found themselves facing an enemy they had never encountered before, one that had spent decades preparing specifically to kill them. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the battle from the bridge of her disguised ship, the Peaceful Dawn. Around her, families who appeared to be refugees were actually some of humanity's most elite soldiers. Children who looked terrified were really junior officers trained from birth for this mission. Weapons online, announced her tactical officer, a man who had been introduced to alien scouts as a simple farmer. All antimatter charges armed and ready. The nearest Cytherian ship, thinking it was pursuing fleeing civilians, moved closer to investigate the strange energy readings coming from the evacuation vessel. It was exactly what Vasquez had hoped for. Range, 2,000 kilometers and closing, reported her navigator. They're taking the bait. Vasquez watched the alien ship approach on her screen. It was called the Star Crusher, a ship that had personally destroyed 17 different civilizations. Its captain probably thought he was about to capture some helpless human refugees. Fire all weapons, Vasquez ordered. The Peaceful Dawn's disguise fell away like a discarded mask. Hidden weapon ports opened along its hull, revealing enough firepower to level a continent. Antimatter torpedoes, plasma cannons, and kinetic kill vehicles all fired at once, turning the humble transport ship into a screaming angel of destruction. The Star Crusher never had a chance to return fire. The concentrated bombardment tore through its shields, armor, and hull in seconds. Another Cytherian dreadnought died in flames, destroyed by what its crew thought was a ship full of terrified civilians. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as humanity's 50-year deception finally revealed itself. Ships that had appeared to be helpless transports turned into deadly warships. Research stations became weapons platforms. Mining equipment transformed into military hardware. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't exist in their databases. Every species they had ever conquered fought desperately to defend their homeworld when invaded. But humanity had done something different. They had spent 50 years turning their entire solar system into a weapon, then disguised it as a peaceful civilization. Dr. Marcus Webb watched the battle from his hidden laboratory, coordinating the antimatter attacks with scientific precision. Each shot had to be perfectly timed to exploit the rotating shield frequencies. Miss by even a fraction of a second, and the torpedo would harmlessly splash against alien defenses. Station 12 reports successful hit, announced his assistant. That's 8 Cytherian ships destroyed, only 4 left in the main fleet. Webb nodded grimly. The plan was working better than they had dared hope, but he knew the hardest part was still coming. The remaining alien ships would adapt their defenses now that they understood the threat. The element of surprise was gone. "Signal all stations," Webb ordered. "Switch to Protocol 7, no more antimatter attacks. Time for the kinetic kill vehicles." The remaining Catherian ships tried desperately to regroup, but humanity had prepared for this too. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt were thousands of small, fast-moving projectiles that had been accelerated to incredible speeds over the past 50 years. They looked like space debris to casual observation, but they were really weapons traveling at nearly 10% of light speed. When they hit the alien ships, the results were devastating. Kinetic energy alone was enough to punch through any armor the galaxy had ever developed. The aliens watched in horror as their mighty warships were torn apart by what appeared to be random chunks of rock and metal. Admiral Chun observed the battle with cold satisfaction. This was what 50 years of preparation looked like. Every weapon, every strategy, every detail had been planned with one goal in mind: to make any alien force that threatened Earth regret their decision. "Admiral," Captain Morrison reported, "we're detecting emergency broadcasts from the surviving alien ships. They're calling for reinforcements and trying to warn their homeworld." "Let them," Chun replied. "By the time help arrives, there won't be anyone left to rescue." The last Catherian ship, Ambassador Veltar-S flagship, tried desperately to escape. Its captain fired every weapon at his disposal, but the humans had vanished back into the asteroid field like ghosts. They appeared just long enough to deliver killing blows, then disappeared again. Lieutenant Torres watched from her hidden position as the alien flagship burned. This was the same ship that had broadcast humanity's death sentence just hours before. Now it was a crippled wreck, bleeding atmosphere and debris. "This is for every world you destroyed," she whispered, as she fired the final torpedo that sent the alien ambassador into the cold darkness of space. When the battle was over, 12 Catherian ships lay in ruins. Not a single human vessel had been lost. The galaxy's most feared military force had been completely destroyed by what they thought was a primitive, helpless species, but this was just the beginning. The real war was about to start. 3 days after the destruction of the Catherian fleet, emergency signals began arriving at hegemony command centers across the galaxy. The messages were garbled, desperate, and almost impossible to believe. An entire invasion fleet had been wiped out by a species that wasn't supposed to have any real military capability. Hi. Commander Zexthai sat in his command chamber on the fortress world of Kitharos Prime, staring at the fragmentary reports with growing disbelief. His pale blue skin had turned almost white with shock as he read the final transmission from Ambassador Veltar-S flagship. "Impossible," he muttered to his aide. 12 dreadnoughts destroyed by mining equipment and civilian transports? These humans must have used some kind of weapon we've never seen before. What the High Commander didn't understand was that the humans had indeed used weapons he'd never seen before. Not because the technology was beyond Catherian understanding, but because no civilized species had ever been insane enough to build them. On Earth, Colonel James Harrison led a team of specialists through the wreckage of a Catherian escape pod that had crashed in the Pacific Ocean. Inside, they found 3 surviving aliens who were now experiencing something their species had never encountered in their 1,000-year history of conquest: capture by an enemy. "Please," one of the aliens begged in broken English as Harrison's team secured the crash site. "We surrender. We mean no harm. We were only following orders." Harrison looked down at the creature with cold eyes. This was one of the beings that had threatened to turn Earth into a lifeless rock. "Orders to commit genocide," he replied quietly. "We know exactly what your species does to planets that resist." The interrogation took place in a secure facility beneath the Colorado mountains. Dr. Sarah Kim led the questioning, using translation software that humanity had secretly developed from decades of monitoring alien communications. "Tell us about Your military structure, she demanded of the lead prisoner, a Catherian officer named Sub-Commander Yolonos. How many ships does the hegemony have? Where are your main bases? Yolonos stared at her with his large black eyes. You don't understand what you've done. The hegemony has ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. We have fleets numbering in the thousands. When they learn what happened here, they will send enough ships to turn your star into a supernova. Dr. Kim smiled coldly. That's exactly what we're counting on. The alien prisoners couldn't understand the human response to their threats. Every other species in the galaxy had begged for mercy when faced with hegemony retaliation. These humans seemed to welcome it. You're insane, Yolonos whispered. Your entire species is insane. We watched you for 50 years. You seem peaceful, rational, but the way you fight, it's like you enjoy causing destruction. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. We don't enjoy it, but we're very, very good at it. And we've had 50 years to study your weaknesses. What the aliens were slowly beginning to realize was that humanity had never intended to simply defend Earth. The destruction of the invasion fleet was just the opening move in a much larger plan. Admiral Chun stood before a holographic display showing the captured Catherian navigation data. Her technical teams had been working around the clock to decrypt the alien star charts, and what they found was exactly what they had hoped for. 3 major shipyards within 50 light years, she announced to her assembled officers. 4 supply depots, 2 fortress worlds, and the location of Kitharos Prime itself. Captain Morrison studied the data with growing excitement. Admiral, with their navigation computers, we could hit all of these targets simultaneously. They won't be expecting attacks on their own territory. Chun nodded. This was the true genius of humanity's strategy. While other species fought defensively, trying to protect their homeworld from alien invasion, humans had prepared for offensive operations. They had built their secret military not just to defend Earth, but to carry the war to enemy territory. How long to prepare our ships for long-range operations? Chun asked. 18 hours, replied Dr. Webb from his hidden laboratory. We've been building interstellar drive systems for decades. Our ships may look primitive, but they can travel faster and farther than anything the hegemony has. The Catherian prisoners watched in growing horror as they began to understand what the humans were planning. Through their interrogation sessions, they learned that Earth had been preparing for interstellar warfare since the first alien probe was detected 50 years ago. You built weapons specifically to kill us, Yolonos said to Dr. Kim during one session. You studied our technology for decades, learned our weaknesses, designed entire battle strategies around destroying our ships. No species has ever done that before. Most species wait until they're invaded to start preparing for war, Kim replied. We decided to be ready 50 years early. Good thing, too. But why? The alien asked desperately. Why did you assume we would be hostile? Many species join the hegemony peacefully. Kim's expression hardened. Because we intercepted your communications. We know what joining peacefully really means. Slavery, genetic modification, forced labor. We've seen the records of what you did to the other worlds. What terrified the aliens most was the realization that humans had been planning this war before they even made contact. Every mining station, every research facility, every civilian ship had been designed with hidden military purposes. The humans had spent 50 years turning their entire civilization into a weapon on the hidden moon base where Captain Elena Vasquez was being debriefed. She described the battle from her perspective as commander of a disguised warship. They never suspected, she told Admiral Chun over a secure channel. Even when we opened fire, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Their combat doctrine assumes that civilian vessels are helpless. They have no tactics for dealing with warships disguised as transports. How did your crew perform? Chun asked. Vasquez smiled grimly. Like they were born for it. 30 years of training, Admiral. 30 years of pretending to be peaceful civilians while learning how to kill aliens with maximum efficiency. When the moment came, they were perfect. This was what the Catherian prisoners found most disturbing about humanity. It wasn't just their military technology or their tactical innovations. It was the fact that an entire generation of humans had grown up knowing that war was coming, preparing for it, and when the time came, they had fought with a level of coordination and ferocity that seemed impossible. Dr. Webb explained it to the captured aliens during one interrogation session. Every human child born in the last 50 years has been educated about your species. They know what you do to conquered worlds. They know that you would enslave or kill their families. So when you threatened Earth, you weren't just fighting our military. You were fighting parents defending their children, children defending their future, and grandparents defending their legacy. The lead prisoner, Yolonos, finally understood the magnitude of what his people had walked into. You turned your entire species into soldiers. No, Webb corrected. We turned our entire species into survivors. There's a difference. As reports continued to arrive from across human space, the full scope of the victory became clear. Not only had the invasion fleet been completely destroyed, but humanity had captured enough alien technology and navigation data to launch their own offensive operations. Admiral Chun addressed her officers one final time before the fleet departed for enemy territory. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species that would either surrender immediately or fight a desperate defensive battle. They never considered that we might have been preparing to take the war to them. What's our primary objective? Asked Captain Morrison. Chun's smile was cold and predatory. Simple. We're going to do to them exactly what they threatened to do to us. By the time we're finished, the Catherian hegemony will be nothing but a memory. The aliens had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had mistaken humanity's peaceful appearance for weakness. They thought that because humans seemed rational and civilized, they would fight like other rational, civilized species instead. They had encountered something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that prepared for war in peacetime, that disguised their military as civilians, and that fought not just to survive, but to utterly destroy their enemies. The war was about to enter a new phase, and the Catherians were about to learn why threatening human children was the worst mistake their species had ever made. 6 months after the destruction of the Catherian invasion fleet, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as 3 of the hegemony's most important worlds burned under human assault. The impossible had become reality, the newest species unknown. Space was bringing a 1,000-year empire to its knees. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Retribution, watching the orbital bombardment of Kitharos Prime through the main viewscreen. The fortress world that had served as the hegemony's capital for centuries was now a series of burning cities and melted military installations. Final defensive grid is down, reported Captain Morrison from the weapons console. The planet is completely defenseless. Around them, the human fleet hung in space like avenging angels. Ships that had once been disguised as mining vessels and research platforms now revealed their true nature as some of the most advanced warships ever built. 50 years of secret development had produced technology that made Catherian defenses look primitive. Open a channel to the planetary surface, Chun ordered. Let's give them the same chance they gave us. The transmission reached every communication device on Kitharos Prime. High Commander Zexthai, cowering in his underground bunker, watched as Admiral Chun's face appeared on screens across his dying world. People of Kitharos Prime, Chun began, her voice carrying the cold authority of absolute victory. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleets are destroyed. Your defenses are gone. Your empire is finished. Zexthai felt his body trembling as he listened to the human speak. This was impossible. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for a millennium. They had never faced defeat. How could a single primitive species destroy everything they had built? You gave Earth 72 hours to surrender, Chun continued. You threatened to turn our world into a lifeless rock. You showed us holographic records of 12 species you had genocided. You believed we would bow before your superior power. The image shifted to show human fleets simultaneously attacking Catherian strongholds across the galaxy. Shipyards that had built warships for centuries were now twisted wreckage floating in space. Supply depots that had fed the hegemony war machine were burning debris fields. "You were wrong," Chun said simply. "Earth's answer is not surrender. Earth's answer is fire." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as humanity's offensive reached its climax. Captain Elena Vasquez led the assault on the fortress world of Valkyrian, where Cytherian ground forces had trained for conquest for hundreds of years. Her ship, still disguised as the humble transport Peaceful Dawn, emerged from hyperspace directly above the planet's military academy. "Remember," she announced to her crew, "these are the soldiers who would have enslaved our children. Show them exactly what human children are capable of when they grow up." The bombardment was swift and merciless. Weapon systems that had been hidden inside civilian cargo holds rained destruction on military targets with surgical precision. Within hours, the most feared ground army in the galaxy was reduced to scattered refugees hiding in underground shelters. Dr. Marcus Webb coordinated the attacks from his mobile command center, using captured Cytherian navigation data to guide human strike forces to targets across the galaxy. His antimatter weapons, refined over 50 years of development, proved capable of cracking planetary shields that had never been breached. "Target the shipyards first," he instructed his fleet commanders, "then the supply depots. Finally, the fortress worlds. We don't just want to defeat them, we want to make sure they can never threaten anyone again." The systematic destruction of Cytherian infrastructure was carried out with the same careful planning that had characterized humanity's defense of Earth. Every target was chosen for maximum strategic impact. Every attack was timed for devastating effect. But the most shocking moment came when President Alexandra Morrison's voice echoed across every communication channel in the galaxy. Her message reached not just the Cytherians, but every species that lived under hegemony rule. "People of the galaxy," Morrison began, speaking from the Oval Office on Earth, "for 1,000 years you have lived in fear of the Cytherian hegemony. They told you that resistance was futile. They showed you the burned remains of worlds that dared to fight back. They convinced you that their power was absolute." The transmission showed real-time footage of Cytherian fleets burning in space, their mighty dreadnoughts reduced to debris by human weapons. Fortress worlds that had seemed invincible were now smoking ruins. Today, Earth proves that no empire lasts forever. No tyrant is truly invincible. The Cytherian hegemony is finished, and with it, their reign of terror across the galaxy. Morrison's image was replaced by holographic displays showing the full scope of human victory. In 6 months of warfare, humanity had destroyed over 300 Cytherian warships, captured 50 star systems, and liberated dozens of enslaved species. "But this is not about conquest," Morrison continued. "Earth has no desire to rule the galaxy. We fight only to ensure that no species will ever again face the choice between slavery and extinction. The galaxy belongs to all of us." "High Commander." Zextai watched the human president's speech from his bunker, finally understanding the true scope of the disaster that had befallen his people. The humans weren't just winning the war, they were ending it on their terms. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from our remaining fleet commanders. The 4th Battle Group is requesting permission to surrender rather than face destruction. The 7th Defense Fleet has already powered down their weapons." Zextai closed his large black eyes. In his species' 1,000-year history, they had never surrendered to anyone. The concept didn't exist in their military doctrine. But faced with complete annihilation, what choice did they have? Colonel James Harrison led the ground assault on the Cytherian command bunker, his troops moving through the underground facility with practiced efficiency. These were soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment, children of the generation that had prepared for alien invasion, now grown into humanity's most effective warriors. The capture of High Commander Zextai was almost anticlimactic. The alien leader who had once commanded fleets capable of destroying star systems was found cowering in his personal chambers, surrounded by the bodies of subordinates who had chosen death over capture. "High Commander Zextai," Harrison said, Formally, by the authority of the Earth Defense Force, I place you under arrest for crimes against sentient life. You will be tried for genocide, slavery, and the attempted destruction of inhabited worlds. Zexthai looked up at the human officer with eyes full of defeat. How? He whispered. How did you defeat us? We are the masters of the galaxy. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Harrison's expression was grim but satisfied. You made one critical mistake. You threatened our families. When humans fight for their families, we don't fight to survive. We fight to win, completely and permanently. The final act of the war came when Admiral Chun broadcast humanity's terms to the scattered remnants of the Catherian fleet. The message was simple and non-negotiable. The Catherian hegemony is hereby dissolved. All military vessels will surrender immediately or be destroyed. All enslaved populations will be freed. All conquered worlds will be granted independence. Any species that attempts to rebuild the hegemony will face the same fate as those who created it. But Chin's most important announcement came at the end of her transmission. The galaxy will never again be ruled by a single empire. Earth hereby establishes the Galactic Defense Covenant, an alliance of free worlds, dedicated to preventing any future attempts at galactic conquest. Any species that threatens the freedom of others will answer to all of us. The response from across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had lived in terror for centuries began broadcasting messages of gratitude and requests to join the new alliance. The Catherian Empire, which had seemed invincible just months before, was replaced by a confederation of free worlds united in their determination to remain free. Dr. Sarah Kim, analyzing the captured Catherian databases, made a discovery that explained everything. Hidden in their most secret files was a single entry about Sol 3, filed away and apparently ignored by Catherian leadership. Warning: species designation human shows extreme aggressive tendencies when threatened. Recommend quarantine protocols. Do not engage under any circumstances. Previous observation teams report unusual behavior patterns inconsistent with standard pre-contact profiles. The warning had been written 50 years ago by the first Catherian scouts to observe Earth. It had been dismissed by the hegemony leadership as cowardice. That dismissal had cost them everything. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, they left behind a galaxy forever changed. The age of empire was over. The age of freedom had begun. And at the center of it all was a small blue world whose children had grown up knowing that some fights were worth everything, and some enemies could never be allowed to win. The galaxy had learned a new truth. When Earth's children were threatened, Earth answered with fire. And that fire burned until nothing remained of those who threatened them but ash and memory.